a lot of young moms are scrolling on Instagram in the middle of the night as they're feeding a baby and seeing what it feels like other moms are either doing better or maybe they have things easier than they do. For me, the way that it manifested was anger. And I had never dealt with just this intense feeling of like rage, even, within the first few days of having a baby. And I'm looking at this baby and I am overwhelmed with how much I love this child. I've been praying for this child, like I would give my life for this child. And yet I would feel these moments of like just feeling out of control. At the same time, you're scrolling and you're seeing on social media that like, well, surely I'm doing something wrong. Sometimes you have to be the one to be vulnerable first and say, hey, I am really struggling with this. And it's amazing how quickly people will chime in and say, I have been there.
Welcome to the show, everyone. My name is Josh Doyle, and thank you for tuning into this episode of No Longer Nomads. It is Tuesday at 5 a.m., and that's when we usually launch episodes. And so I'm very excited with this next guest. She has worked on an incredible devotional called Lift Your Eyes, and she runs an incredible business called Brighter Day Press. And so excited to dive into this episode. I hope it's an encouragement for those of you out there, and let's dive into it. Whitney, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're up to.
Yeah, so I am Whitney Newby. My husband is Sean. We've been married for 16 years, and we have 4 kiddos who are currently 12, 10, 7, and 6.
Wow.
And we've been homeschooling since the beginning, which was never something that was on our radar until we kind of just dove in and have loved doing that with our family. And we run a small business ministry called Brighter Day Press, where we create gospel-centered, literature-rich curriculum and resources for families, mostly homeschool families, but also just any believing families.
Awesome. So tell us why you started Brighter Day Press, what inspired you, encouraged you to launch it.
Yeah, so about 5 years ago is when we started, and we had been homeschooling for a few years, and I'm a registered nurse, and
Okay.
we had just moved to Texas from North Carolina in January of 2020. And so about 6 weeks later, after we moved, everything started happening in March of 2020. And so I had not yet gone back to work as a nurse.
Okay.
And I was thinking, well, I'll probably start looking around March. Well, then everything happened with COVID. And so I suddenly found myself with a lot more time than I had had in years, because for a while I was homeschooling, I was working as a nurse, I was trying to juggle all of those things. And we had 4 very small children. And so in that time, I started writing down what was really working for our family. So for us, that was our 20 to 30 minute morning time routine. And this didn't have to be a homeschool thing, but for any families, we were reading the Bible together. We were singing a hymn. We were memorizing scripture just a little bit at a time and really seeing fruit in our family. And so that's how Brighter Day Press was born. And then since then, I think we have over 70 resources and products that have come out of that, of just really, everything is born in what our family needs. And so I create that if it's not already out there, and then share it with other families.
I love it. That's so cool. I would encourage you guys to check it out. Check out the website and also check out the Instagram page. It's amazing work. My wife and I have been following you for a while, so very excited to have you on. What is the website, by the way? Is it brighterdaypress.com?
Yes, brighterdaypress.com.
Okay.
And even if you don't homeschool, I love recommending books for all different ages. And so these days it can be tricky navigating the local library, and especially if you have children that are maybe voracious readers and you can't pre-read all the things. I have lots of great, wholesome, engaging book lists available for free on the website.
Awesome.
So
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump into this episode. And one of the reasons I'm really excited to have you on, and honestly, one of the reasons why I launched this podcast, was when we went into parenting, there's no manual. I mean, I always remember hearing from my parents and other, parents like, oh, parenting is so fun. It's so hard. But I didn't realize it would be this hard.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the emotions that you feel, that your kids feel, I mean, it is a very hard time.
Yes.
And it's amazing, but also it's one of the most incredible challenges out there, I think. And so where I'd love to go with this episode is just the encouragement and hope that you bring, which I think is incredible, but also painting the reality of it is lonely and it is hard. And so I don't know if you've had moments in your motherhood journey, your parenting journey, of where you've had these moments of loneliness, and how do you combat that?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yes. I think especially in this social media age, so where we are, a lot of young moms are scrolling on Instagram in the middle of the night as they're feeding a baby, and seeing what it feels like other moms are either doing better, or maybe they have things easier than they do. So yeah. I know for me, we did not have grandparents in the area. We could not drop our kids off. And so it was just, we didn't have a lot of outside support. And in those early days where you are, not sleeping, for yep. moms, you're riding those postpartum hormonal waves. For me, the way that it manifested was anger. And I had never dealt with just this intense feeling of like rage when I think I was just so exhausted, and again, hormones and all of those things. But even, within the first few days of having a baby, and I'm looking at this baby and I am overwhelmed with how much I love this child. I've been praying for this child. Like I would give my life for this child. And yet I would feel these moments of like, just feeling out of control. And like I had to set the baby down and scream into a pillow, like, what is wrong with me? But then, at the same time, you're scrolling and you're seeing on social media that like, well, surely I'm doing something wrong.
Right.
Because
everyone else looks happy.
Yeah, like it can't be this hard. And so, I found, a lot of times what I've found over the years is that sometimes you have to be the one to be vulnerable first, and to go first, and to say, in your small group at church or in a safe place that you feel like people are not going to just judge or whatever, and say, hey, I am really struggling with this. And it's amazing how quickly people will chime in and say, oh my goodness, I am struggling with that too, or I have been there. And it just kind of opens the door for a place of vulnerability, but also a place where we can encourage each other and say, you know what, it's not always this hard. Yeah. And even a few years out, so our kids, our youngest is 6, our oldest is 12. This to me is the golden age of parenting. It is just so much easier physically, emotionally. I mean, we're loving it. And I did enjoy those, aspects of those younger years, but to be able to tell moms, you know what, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. These days though are really brutal sometimes. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah. So what do you think changed with you? Was it age? Was it as they got older? Because for me personally, man, anger is right there for me too. I never dealt with that at all. And then once we started having kids at night or bedtime routines, it's just like, what are these deep feelings I've never felt?
Totally.
And it's hard. Like you said, you do feel out of control. So maybe there's someone listening to this episode, and is there any encouragement that you'd have for them? Maybe they're in that stage right now going, I didn't realize it would be this hard.
Yeah. I think a few things really helped me in that struggle. One was just admitting it. It was hard to even admit to myself at first because I never pictured that I would struggle so much with this. But I think in those moments, I found that taking a giant physical step back and pausing in that moment when you feel that tension rising, I realized in those moments, well, two things. One is that I would take those moments to just pray. And I would often pray out loud and just say, Lord, I cannot do this without you. I am so weak. I am so weary. Please, Lord, give me strength. And so often in those moments, he gives you what you need, or he gives you the perspective that you need. But also, I would realize in those moments that I wasn't actually angry at my children. It was probably something else, going on in my life, maybe even just a sleepless night that was making me angry. But I have been able to practice so much more self-control in those moments when I just take that pause. So that's just a really practical thing. I also found that getting outside every day, moving my body was really key in just being able to practice self-control. Even when you're exhausted, it just makes a big difference. And then also, like I said, just having some kind of community or accountability where you're saying, will you please check in on me about this? Because I don't want to be an angry mom. I don't want this to be my legacy or this to be my ongoing struggle. But I do think time really does help. I think when you're sleeping through the night, when you are able to reason with your kids, there are stages that you just can't even reason with what, they're crying about.
And that's the hardest, right? It's just oh man.
It is. So I do think it gets easier. I will say I am not an angry mom these days. God has pulled me through that in a variety of ways, but I think time really does help.
That's so good. Yeah, and I think what you said as well, just being around other parents is so key.
Yes.
For us, for the first few years, it was during pandemic, so we weren't around many people.
Right.
And it was just like, is this normal? Did my parents feel this way when they had us, I don't remember them at bath time, you do this, you do that, and just yelling at us. And it is just such a sanctifying process.
Oh, it is.
But I think you're right. Being around people is key. And I love that. If there's stuff in the moment you're battling, just pausing and praying, Lord, I can't do this. I give this to you. I think that's really key.
And it's amazing because our kids become little accountability partners in that they're watching us, go to Jesus in our need. And these days, my kids, when they feel frustration rising or something not going well in our day, they're the first to remind me and say, Mom, I think we need to pray.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it's like, okay, buddy, why don't we pray right now? And that was just kind of a side effect of what I was just needing the Lord and needing him in that moment. And I didn't have a quiet space to get away and get on my knees. I'm right there in the chaos and he meets us there.
So good. So. I love that. Your kids see by example.
They do.
And
good and bad.
Good. Yeah. They're there.
They've seen a lot of bad too, but
Sure.
They're picking up on everything. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to hear about this devotional you wrote. It's called Lift Your Eyes. Lift Your Eyes. Is that right?
Yes.
Based on Psalm 121.
Yes.
It's, I'm excited. And for those of you out there, this episode is recorded before Mother's Day, but will be released after it. So
perfect.
If you flopped on your gift and you need to redeem yourself, which I've had plenty of duds and I probably will, but it happens. So if you do, this would be a great devotional to check out. So
thank you. Yeah. So Lift Your Eyes. It's based on Psalm 121, which begins, I lift up my eyes to the hills, from where does my help come? And it's only 8 verses long. So even listeners that, I would really encourage you to commit it to memory, because those 8 verses tell us so much about who God is and the promises he has made for his children. Yeah. And it's for all believers, but I think there's a really special place. It's a very tender psalm for moms on their journey of motherhood, and especially these early years of motherhood. So we go through 8 attributes of God that we see pointed out in these verses of Psalm 121. So we talk about him as our helper and protector, provider, comfort, shepherd, sustainer. And then under each of those attributes, there are 5 devotions that pertain specifically to moms that I think all of us have experienced. So when I'm tempted to compare, when I'm feeling angry, when I'm grieving, just these things that we walk through as moms that are probably common to all of us. And maybe it's just helpful to read another mom's experience and say, I am not alone, but then also to encourage that mom to lift her eyes to the Lord, who promises to be all of these things for her.
When you started Brighter Day Press, the feedback you got, what was some of the things you're hearing back from mothers? It was consistent. Was it comparison? Yeah. Was it guilt? You mentioned grief just now. Yeah. Is there something that you hear more than others? It just really makes you go, man, my heart is for XYZ.
Yeah. I think for primarily, young moms, which is my community, and also homeschool moms who are, taking on even more, and they never, not never, but they're with their kids pretty much 24/7. I think feeling those feelings of overwhelm, anxiety, it's all on me, those kinds of things. And I think I talk a lot in the book about just some simple perspective shifts that have helped me along the way. So, when we feel like it's all on me, which I feel that we need to make holidays special. We're responsible for our children's happiness and their education and
their memories,
all of these things, that Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest. And even when I feel like the weight of, sometimes in my head, I'm saying, I have to do these things. I'm the one that has to do all of the laundry and make the meals and do all these things. And instead of I have to, I get to. These really simple perspective shifts that, these are the children that I have longed for and prayed for, and that so many women long and pray for and may never have. And so just that perspective shift, I feel like sometimes I think it helps to just say these things out loud, which sounds kind of silly in the moment. But if the mom's perspective is shifted throughout the day to be on the Lord or just on the right things, it changes her entire home.
I'm glad you brought that up about the perspective shift. I was with some buddies and we were talking about this, and I was talking to a guy who's older, whose kids are all grown up now, and just really talking about this, like, man, nighttime is so hard. I'm up at 3 a.m. and I'm laying next to my little guy's crib holding his hand because, that's one of the new things he wants is, and it's like, I got to sit there for hours in the middle of the night and I'm exhausted and I'm sleeping on the floor. And he pretty much said that same thing, Whitney, was, instead of changing that perspective of I have to get up with this kid, I have to be around him, is shift your perspective to, I get to spend time with him right now. I get to, when he is sad and cranky or whatever in the middle of the night, I'm his safe place. And he gets to come to me. So, shifting my perspective of, instead of I have to do this and, I have something tomorrow morning, I'm going to be tired, but shifting that perspective to, I get to, and really I can attest to that as well. It totally shifts your mood. And all of a sudden you're like, you look at that little guy and you're like, I don't have a ton of time with you when you're this size, and it's really sad to think about.
It's so true. Oh my goodness. There's, another perspective shift that I talk about in the book is that we always feel like we don't have time because we have these mile-long to-do lists. And a lot of times, we miss out on connecting with our kids because we're so busy doing things for them and around them and all of that. And I was convicted a few years ago. My oldest son is a budding chef, and he's very interested in just different cuisines. And so he wanted to make this Greek meal, and I'm looking at his plans and I'm like, this is like hours of time. Like, this is going to be our next 2 hours making, rolling grape leaves and all these things. And, but I just felt convicted that, this time is so fleeting. I don't know when I'm going to get this chance again. And I remembered something that I had been told when I was working as a nurse. Actually, one of the things that we were encouraged to say as we were interacting with our patients and about to leave the room, we would ask them if they needed anything else. And then we would look at them and we would say, I have time. And we were encouraged to say that to every patient. And frankly, balancing 6 patients' needs. And I mean, I didn't have time, but it was amazing how you would see that patient's countenance just soften. And they're like, oh, I feel seen and I feel treasured. And so we can use that with our kids as well. And so many times we don't have time. We don't have time to make a Greek meal or whatever it might be. But it's amazing how just saying those 3 words, like, hey, buddy, I have time. Let's go make a puzzle together. Let's take a walk together. And how not only, you're able to connect, even if you have 10 minutes, just being intentional with that time. And it's amazing how their behavior improves and changes when they see that you're being intentional about connecting with them.
I have time. That's so good to say. And I'm sure that makes them feel honored too. Cause at times I'll be looking at my phone and I just realize, man, Griffin just came in, was talking about something for like a minute and kept trying to get my attention. And then he was off, but I think, man, from his perspective, he came into Daddy.
Right.
Daddy was locked in on his phone.
Yep.
Daddy, looking for something, needing my help, and then doesn't get it and leaves. I think, man, that's just so I know all parents out there struggle with that. I'm not
Totally.
the only one. And,
Totally.
but it's just so difficult. So, one thing I love to touch on is, I felt this, my wife has felt this, is anxiety, fear. I mean, there's so much that can be wrapped up in anxiety. I didn't have that as much before kids.
Right.
And then now with kids, I'm like, man, there's just a lot of little things that can chew up your mind.
Yeah.
Have you dealt with that? Have you worked with people that have, that are dealing with that, moms are dealing with that, and any advice for them?
Yeah, definitely. I do talk a little bit about that in the book. And one of the things that I love about this psalm in particular is it's telling us who God is. And one of the things throughout this psalm is that it tells us that he is our keeper. And to me, I had to research what that even meant, because we don't use that word a lot in English. He keeps us. But if you read the psalm, it will talk about how he watches and guards and preserves, and he never slumbers or sleeps. But in the original Hebrew of the psalm, it actually uses the word to keep or keeper, which is shamar in Hebrew, 6 times in 5 verses. And so the original hearers would have heard, he keeps us, he keeps us, he keeps us. And I've loved this picture because we actually see this same concept when it says that God, in Genesis, God placed man in the garden to tend and to keep it. And so it's kind of like a gardener, if we picture us as his fruit or his plant, and God as the gardener bending down. And what you have to do for a plant to flourish, you're watering it, you're pruning it, you're getting your hands dirty, you're protecting it from wild animals. And when I think about how present God is, how close and near, and how he is our shepherd and our keeper, that has been such a beautiful picture to me. And but yes, I have absolutely dealt with anxiety, and I think a lot of anxiety stems from the idea that I am in control, and that I, hold all of these things, or maybe that I feel out of control of my kids' lives. Yeah. And so to think that he is not only my keeper, but he's the keeper of my children, that he never slumbers or sleeps, even when I have to turn my back on them or I have to sleep. He is watching and guarding and protecting and preserving their lives, because he is their keeper as well, their shepherd. And I love that actually the final verse, it says that he keeps our going out and our coming in from this time forth and forevermore. And when I think about that picture, that, he is there, here and there, from now and forever, that is comprehensive protection. And so I think there's actually a really beautiful picture in scripture. I think it's in Matthew 14, where it's talking about something that we often deal with, but it's the story of Peter walking on the water toward Jesus. So Jesus is walking on the water on the Sea of Galilee during a storm, and Peter sees him and he's like, I want to walk on the water too. And so Jesus invites him to come, and he's able for a few faithful steps to keep his eyes fixed on Jesus and walk miraculously on the water. But very quickly, he starts looking around at his circumstances. He is far from solid ground. He is looking at the wind and the waves that threaten to consume him, and he starts to sink and drown. And we do the same thing. I think when we look at our circumstances, when we look at these overwhelming situations in our lives, we start to sink and drown in this pit of despair and anxiety and overwhelm. And then we look back at Jesus and we see who he has promised to be through his word. We pray and we ask him for his perspective. And, we're able to do miraculous things when that happens. And so I think just that shift in perspective can make all the difference.
That is so good. I'm loving this. This is such a practical episode. And I love these ones because for me, it's like we talked about before, you can just relate with other parents and go, man, we're all in this together. Yes. No one's got to figure it out. We're doing the best we can. And so, another thing I've also felt with anxiety is just how important rest is. But I love what you talked about, and really it comes down to like what you've said is spiritual care. And I've heard you say this in the past, spiritual care is super important. Yeah. And it's just as important as physical rest.
Yes.
How would you unpack that?
Oh, I totally believe that. And that is coming from a place where I have failed in a lot of ways. So it's like when I feel like when I'm not walking with the Lord, reading scripture, praying, communing with him, and I'm feeling far from him, I cannot be a good mom. And so, but it's tough in those early days, years when you're not sleeping. You're like, how do I get up earlier than my kids to pack in, Bible reading time when it feels like I set my alarm for 6 a.m. and at 5:55, here they come, with their needs.
Ready to
go.
There's no buffering for them. They're ready to go.
No, exactly. And so what I found early on, so these days, our kids, we actually have a house rule that they are not allowed to come downstairs until 7:30 in the morning. So that I know anytime before that time, because we homeschool, we're home, together all the time. We need some boundaries there. But I know that anytime that I get up before 7:30, unless they really have a need, I have that time to prepare my heart and mind and body for the day. But in those early years, that was not always possible. And so I found that even just listening to an audio Bible, I love the Doyle audio Bible app because you can set up a Bible reading plan. So I love just a chronological reading plan, but you could also work through the Psalms or whatever you want to study. You can choose the translation, you can choose the music underneath, you can choose the voice, and you can also set it up so it pings on your phone in the morning at whatever time. So you have very little excuse to not be listening to the word. And I just found that, doing that while I'm nursing a baby in the middle of the night, while I'm pushing a stroller and meditating on a verse or two for the day and praying that back to God, I am connecting with him, even though it's not quiet. It's probably chaos around me. There are ways to connect with him through the day. And I just think in those early years, we need him more than ever. And so look for those ways for how to connect with him.
Really well said. So when your kids got a little bit older, was it easier to establish that? So by the way, we don't do full homeschooling. We do like a university model.
Yes.
So we do 2 in and 3 at home.
Great.
And it works great. My wife loves teaching. And it's just our oldest who's in kindergarten, but it is a beat down at times.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And our second born, he's much more like into school and stuff. And, and maybe, might be a little bit easier. But I love that idea of, hey, you guys are in your room until this time. And when did that really start to shift when they would obey that? Because we've got a little thing in our room or in their rooms as a light. And it's like their alarm clock. And when it goes green, that means you can come out. Yeah. They don't even... maybe they'll pay attention to it. Yeah, they don't really focus on it. But.
So it's, our oldest kind of set the tone with this, and he was great at just staying in his room until a certain time, and that clock is a great idea. I think for some of our kids, we've had to use positive reinforcement. So like, hey, if you will stay in your room, 5 mornings in a row, you're going to get a sticker on your chart and you don't have to use that for long, but then they really get the idea. And then you get, ice cream at the end or whatever it might be. But I would say, since we started homeschooling, that has been really important that we have a little bit of time to just prepare for the morning, that we're not met with their needs. And then also in the afternoon, if our kids weren't napping, if they were too old for naps, we still enforced an hour-long rest time. Okay. So we still do that every day, and actually it's 90 minutes, and they do not have to nap, of course, at these ages, but they will read or listen to audiobooks. And they do that right now for us between 12:30 and 2. So we wrap up our homeschool day, we have lunch together, and 12:30 to 2, they're able to just be in separate spaces, read what they want. Our oldest usually finishes up some homeschool, but we all need that. We all need that space and just recharge. And then we get back together at 2 and we have, piano lessons or soccer practice or just hanging out together, and we're ready for the rest of the day. So those boundaries have been very, very important for us.
That's so good. That we've tried to do that as well. Yeah. And there's probably days where it works better than others. Yeah. But I'd love to touch on this as well as this homeschooling piece. We have a lot of young families that listen to this. Yeah. And some of them homeschool, some of them don't. But I know a lot of them that don't. It's like they kind of want to. So if somebody's listening to this, what encouragement would you give to them?
Oh, sure.
I know for us, it was like, my wife was homeschooled and it was kind of a no-brainer. We wanted to go that direction.
Yeah.
What do you like about it? What has been
Yes.
challenging, and why would you encourage other families to do it too?
Yeah, so we dove into homeschooling just when our oldest was going into kindergarten and had no intentions of homeschooling, now 7-8 years later. But we just fell in love with the lifestyle of being able to disciple our kids one-on-one, even teaching them to read has been just a joy. And I have loved how little time it actually takes to homeschool. So we're primarily done by lunch, and then we have the rest of our day to just be together. I work in the afternoon, but they're able to just play with friends. And they have so much time to pursue their own interests. So our oldest is actually a very good pianist and practices for sometimes a couple hours a day because he's preparing for a competition or something. And I don't feel like that would even be possible in a traditional school setting just because of time.
Yeah.
But I would just encourage parents that homeschooling is really just an extension of intentional parenting. So if you are already, reading to your kids, you enjoy spending time with them, you love learning things alongside them, this is just, one more step in that direction. And if you have that willingness to learn alongside them, you really have what you need to homeschool. So it is not, I think actually it's probably a detrimental thing if you have a teaching degree and because I think teachers have a hard time, transitioning back home to be homeschool parents. But I think if you just have that willingness to learn, you enjoy being with your kids, you will make a great homeschool parents. And teachers can be too. I've just heard them say that can be really tricky, but you don't need a teaching degree in order to do it.
Well, and you have so much flexibility as well throughout the day. And, and like you said, those boundaries are key too. And it's probably good for them, to go have that rest time in the middle of the day. And I love that. So are you part of a network or anything where you guys live with other families?
We're not. We are very involved in our church, so that's kind of where we find our community. But we've done little nature clubs in the past.
Oh, I love that. Yep.
And I know a lot of people love, co-ops. For us, I have found our kids don't learn as well in big groups of other kids. And so I have loved just doing our own thing. But as our kids get older and there are subjects that I do not feel prepared to teach or frankly want to teach, want to relearn, pre-algebra, it's been amazing to just find some online classes for our oldest too, that they are doing either self-paced or some are Zoom classes. So our oldest is taking Latin and a creation science course. And, so I'm really just teaching the courses that I am excited about and feel prepared to teach. But there are so many resources that you don't, if you feel like, well, I can't teach pre-calculus or chemistry, you don't have to. There are so many resources available.
I'd love to hear some more about those resources for parents that do feel overwhelmed or just like, I want to do this, but I don't know if I have the tools to do it.
Yeah. I recommend if you are interested in homeschool and you don't know where to start, depending on the ages of your kids, and what's available in your area, if you have a local homeschool family or homeschool mom in your church, in your neighborhood, she is a gold mine. So go to her and say, where do I start? What co-ops are available? There are different restrictions in different states. And so it depends on where you live, as far as what the requirements might be. But homeschooling is legal in all 50 states since 1993, which is kind of crazy. That's kind of recent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, before that, there were some rogue homeschoolers that were risking, jail time for homeschooling their kids. So we've come a very long way, and it almost feels like there's more resources than you could imagine. But I would just say in those early years, especially for kindergarten, first, second, third grade, if you are doing math and language arts, teaching to read, those are the main two things. But the other, other requirements will vary by your state. So
let me ask you this, where I love all the topics we're hitting. And is there any advice out there? We live in an age where it is so hard if kids get into the phone and they love this iPads or whatever, it's so hard to get that away from them. Do you guys have any screen time tips.
Yeah.
You know, I would love to learn from you.
Oh, I love this topic. And I actually just read a book that I would highly recommend called The Opt-Out Family by Erin Lochner. And honestly, it really challenged me because we don't do a lot of screens, but it really challenged me about my own phone use, because it has to start there of what we're modeling before our kids and how addicted we are to social media and all of those things. So it was a very convicting, but very helpful read and talks about a lot of, just how we can model this for our kids. But so one thing that we have tried to do as a family is just to make their life outside of screens so much more compelling than what's on a screen. And so we do really limit screens. We do a few screen-based things for school, but if we're not doing them for school, we primarily limit it to a show that we watch together at night, maybe a couple times a week, and then sometimes on the weekends. But for the most part, we don't do a lot of screens or iPads for entertainment sake. So I have found, especially when we're trying to build readers and critical thinkers, just having them addicted to screens is so counterproductive, because if a child is handed a book or a screen, if an adult is handed a book or a screen, they're going to be drawn to the screen.
Absolutely.
100% of the time. And so we have filled, I have a book obsession in our house. Our kids ask for books all the time, and I pretty much never say no because I want them to be engaged in reading. But also we spend a ton of time outside, but we've had to be really intentional about that, because that is countercultural for sure. We try to just push them outside, and if they say, I'm bored, we're like, good, that's a good thing for you, because I don't remember the quote, but it's like boredom leads to, innovation. And so I want them to have a 90s childhood and, get scraped up knees and broken bones even. And you just don't see a lot of that these days because kids are inside on screen. So actually that was the factor that kind of led us to homeschooling originally, because the school down the street, we visited with our kindergartner. He was already beginning to read. He was very active, and he was thriving doing what we were doing at home. So just reading together, but mostly just free play, playing outside. And we went and visited this kindergarten, and they were so proud of the fact that every kindergartner would have all day access to an iPad. And I'm like, we've been working so hard to keep him off the iPad for all these years. So I'm not ready to send my 5-year-old, and be addicted to an iPad. So I have seen the fruit of, at first it is harder to be screen free or to really limit screens. Yeah. But to be honest, it gets easier over time because our kids look us in the eye. They are creative. They're engaged with people around them. And I have seen such a marked difference when kids their age have phones and have unlimited access to screens in just what type of person they become. It really, really matters.
It's so true. There's a lot in there that you said that was so good. And I love that. Making outside time more exciting than on the phone, and that's really key. And I love that too. Like, I loved my 90s childhood. When the sun was down, I knew it was time to go home. Yes. We'd bike through the neighborhood with buddies and, and go into the forest and create forts and jumps and all that.
It's the best.
And so I love that. My wife is a great boy mom. We have 3 boys, and she's a great boy mom because they will go outside and they're in the mud. They're running around. Just beating each other up anyways, but it's fun.
They have one childhood, and that's what they need. And they're building so many more connections. I think educational technology that, is, I've just seen so much of like, well, you need to be on this app to learn to read. And it's like, so much of this has not even been studied because it just hasn't been around for long at all. And I'm seeing, how many connections their brains are making just outside in nature, playing, building and playing with forts. I mean, we just got our 6-year-old a little dirt bike for his birthday, and he's
that's
just
fun.
all through our property. And I mean, he is learning so much more by doing that than sitting on an iPhone, matching
Watching
numbers
someone else
and
ride a dirt bike.
Yes, no way.
Yeah.
No. So
man, that's so good. Let's go back to the devotional real quick. So what are you hoping to get out of this? So you talked about what inspired you. What is your hope for mothers out there that read this?
This is really the book that I wrote that I wish I had in early motherhood, to know that I was not alone in these struggles and to know how to practically lift my eyes to the Lord when it feels like I am so overwhelmed by all that's around, all the needs that are around me. So I am just praying that it will be a deep encouragement to moms that feel like they are in the trenches, that maybe no one really understands what they're going through. And there's just a lot of rich but practical theology in this book. So my husband and I actually met in Bible college, and my first degree is a Bible degree. And so I'm passionate about the word and making it come alive to moms. So I hope that, even if you've never read a devotional, maybe you don't read a lot of devotionals, I think this has just a lot of practical implications for moms.
I love it. So. That's so good. Well, any other message you have for those listening? Any final message you'd love to share? Anything the Lord's put on your heart, anything like that?
Gosh, I would say one thing that I have just been clinging to recently we have a very demanding season right now, even though I'm not in early motherhood at this point, but we are actually, tomorrow we leave for the next 3 weeks for homeschool conferences, and then we have a week off, and then we have 2 more weeks away. So it's just a lot going on. And there is a beautiful poem that was made famous by Elizabeth Elliot, who was a missionary, and her husband was martyred years ago. And the poem, I don't have it memorized. I wish I did. But the title of the poem is "Do the Next Thing." And I've actually we have mugs in our shop that say, "Do the next thing." And basically the poem is just talking about how as moms or as anyone, we've not been called to do all of the things. We've been called to just place our faith and hope in Christ and then look for the next thing that he's called us to do. And that perspective has been so helpful for me when I do feel so overwhelmed. I will just say it aloud or look at my mug, do the next thing. What is that? It's, it might be as simple as saying to my children, I have time. It might be just running the next load of laundry, but not being so overwhelmed by everything that has to be done in a day, and just putting your head down, or maybe lifting your eyes to the Lord and just doing the next thing.
This has been such a practical episode here. And really, we've gone through a lot of topics, but I think there's so much that folks could pull from this, in whether it's anxiety or loneliness, homeschooling, screen time. There's so much. And I would love to point people to where they can get your devotional and where they can find out more about Brighter Day Press. And can you tell us where for folks to go?
Sure. So we are on Instagram at Brighter Day Press, and I share a lot about just what our daily family life looks like and point to a lot of resources there. We're also at brighterdaypress.com. You can find all of our resources and book lists at brighterdaypress.com. And then you can find my devotional, Lift Your Eyes, on Amazon or really wherever books are sold. So it's in a lot of local bookstores, Barnes & Noble. So wherever you buy books.
Great. Well, Whitney, thank you so much for coming on the show. And for you guys listening, thank you for tuning in to this episode. We'll be back next Tuesday. We release episodes 5 a.m. on Tuesdays. And please make sure to like and subscribe. And, if you feel it, would love a review as well. And so any of that helps. And thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.